Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Klein. Today I'm joined with Alexis Semino, my co host,
Hello.
and our special guest, Chida Darby.
Hey.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about the black press and the distinction between the black press and just the press as we know it. What are the differences, kind of what the history is. And we're going to learn as hosts as much as you will, the audience. So thank you for tuning in. I guess we'll start off with Alexa, how you met Chida, and why we're here today.
All right, so me and Chida and I, are in the same media studies class with Professor Brinson. Thank you. Shout out. Hello. And we had a project where we were supposed to go on a media diet for 3 days. Like, no email, no music, no social media. And Chida couldn't because her job requires media and requires PR, and it just wasn't realistic for her. So she did a presentation on her story with the press, specifically the black press, how it was, her family business and how she actually did that before she came to University of San Diego. And after she gave her speech, I was floored. I immediately texted Kevin. I'm like, Kevin, I have a guest, and I'm going to go find her right now.
And here we are.
Yeah, I found her after class, and here we are. And I was floored. Like, you opened my eyes within that 55 minutes.
So awesome. Wow.
So I'm so excited.
We can all see now.
I'm-
You have opened our eyes.
I'm fangirling. My
Yes.
eyes are open.
So I guess I'll begin with asking, when did you first start going to college? When was this period of absence from going to school and starting your publication that you have now?
Yeah, so I actually graduated high school in 1999.
Okay.
So my first year in college, I was at the University of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really like it.
Mhm.
I came back home.
San Francisco or the college itself?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I came back home, and there was always this expectation to go to college, but there was no rush to finish.
Mhm.
And both my parents are college graduates, and so I knew I wanted to go, but I came back and decided on going to USD since it was comparable to USF.
Where did your parents graduate from? Do you know?
Yes, my dad went to Howard University.
Okay.
And my mother graduated from National.
Awesome. Good
So,
for them.
So came back here. USD was comparable to USF. And so I was back and forth intermittently. When I was here years ago, USD was a very hard school for me to go to as a black woman.
Mhm.
It was not the most welcoming environment.
And what year were you beginning going to college after USF?
I want to say I think I started here in maybe 2001.
Okay.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Weird time.
Yeah, it definitely.
That's-
It was a different place. Like I said, it wasn't the most welcoming place for me. I would literally get sick coming to campus. I didn't want to be here.
Oh.
I hated it. I was
Interesting.
usually the only black person in my class.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of diversity here.
Mhm.
And so time went on, and I kind of pressed through, and then I took a little break. And during that time, I would be back and forth working in the family business. My parents had multiple businesses. And then when I was about 25, 26, I got married and relocated to Baltimore. My husband, I call him my ex-husband, was a English professor at a historically black college. And so I wanted to leave San Diego and experience the East Coast. So did that, and then we had 2 kids. Came back to San Diego in 2009, shortly after my mother passed, and so she and my
Sorry
father.
to hear that.
No, thank you. So she and my father ran the newspaper together, so I came back and kind of stepped in her role in the family business, and so.
Was that hard for you, stepping into something that she was very involved with?
I mean, I grew up in it. I saw them every day. Their offices were across the hall from each other. They were in ministry together. My parents are both pastors, and so they did everything together. So it was hard, but it
Do you think it was healing in a way?
Yeah, but also I kind of felt like it was just something I was supposed to do.
It's a natural progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the challenge was trying to rebrand a 50-something-year-old business. Because my mother had cancer, and during her illness, just the economy was changing, everything was different. So when I came back, my father and I obviously are from 2 different generations, and so I just had to really roll up my sleeves and just try to figure out how was the company going to keep going. Plus I had 2 small children. somewhat of a tumultuous marriage. And so when I came back, I knew that I was going to come back to USD. And so I tried to return in 2011, but my kids were like 1 and 3, and I'd come to school, and
Yeah, it's a tough time.
it was hard. Staff would call me because people wouldn't show up to work, or there was always a fire to put out, and so I would miss class.
Right.
It was just too much.
Especially in that business specifically.
Yeah. So I just said, you know what, there'll be an opportunity for me later. As much as I wanted to finish, I couldn't do it.
Right.
So fast forward, we're here now, and the time came, freed up for me to come back and finish in actually my last year.
Oh.
So I should be able to walk next May, which I'm excited
Yeah.
Well, I applaud you for where you
seriously.
came from and where you are now.
Yeah, thank you.
How old are your kids now?
They are 8 and 11.
8 and 11.
Yeah.
I know one just had a dentist appointment.
Yes, he did. So they live in Florida right now with their dad for the school year. So that's the only reason I'm able to come back to school full time. So, but they're great.
Do you talk to them over the phone and FaceTime and stuff like that?
I do, but it's weird because they don't always talk. They don't call me a lot, and so my oldest
They're at
just
that
turned
age.
11. Yeah, and I was just talking to our oldest son. He
Mom's
just turned
not cool
11.
anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's that I'm not cool, but my
Yeah.
11-year-old said that it's just that they're busy right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, you gotta page them now?
Yeah.
Get a secretary?
The time difference doesn't help, but
That's funny.
they have schedules, so I have to work myself into their
Yeah.
schedule.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So speaking of Florida, I guess to get political very quickly, how do you feel with who is it, Andrew Gillum that was running in Florida for? I believe he was running for governor, Florida against I forget his opponent, but there was a bunch of people backing him. Who was it? I remember seeing a video from P. Diddy. He was on
my gosh.
Instagram, I guess the other day. He's like, guys, there's 40 minutes still to get on the polls. He's like, I don't care what you got to do. You get in your car. You act like you're running for your life. You're acting like you just won the lottery or something. There's something emergent. You just get in the line.
Right,
you
right.
don't
Steady.
get out.
Yeah.
So there's this big thing of making sure that I think particularly that black celebrities were encouraging other black citizens to go and vote, especially in Georgia, that there was some voter suppression definitely going on. I think today, why can't Kemp, is that his last name, that was running for governor? He was also Secretary of State in Georgia.
I think so.
He resigned this morning as
Yeah.
Secretary of State
Whoa.
because of the voter suppression, but still is maintaining seat for governor,
Interesting.
even though, why can't I think of her name? It's going out of my head. Oprah was backing.
Oh,
tremendously.
Stacey Abrams.
Stacey Abrams,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
and
yeah.
she is not conceding yet
Waiting for
because
the
of
votes
voter
to come in.
recount.
Yeah.
So, what were your thoughts during this time of seeing? I know Andrew Gillum said a bunch of times that Trump and his opponent wanted to paint that stereotype that he's this angry black male, and they want him in this corner where America can see him. I knew it. I told you. And he was saying, kind of like Michelle Obama, of going high when they go low in these things. What
Did
does
you-
that mean to you?
DeSantis, sorry to interrupt, DeSantis won by 0.4%.
Yeah, it's
That's
very
insane.
close.
Yeah. So oddly enough, even though I'm in the media business, I'm the most non-political person,
Okay.
and I think it helps me to stay balanced because people tend to get extremely emotional, and I just like looking at the facts.
Yeah.
Sometimes I won't watch it intentionally
For
because
the principle.
it's just too consuming. There's
Yeah.
just so much more to life. There's so much more.
Yeah.
It's a part of it, but there's so much more.
Right.
I'm glad things are changing with Trump being in office. I try to see the positives in things. I'm a Christian, and I try to look at the fact that there are just certain things that God allows, and what's the purpose? We don't always know,
Right.
and it's not for us to know. You know, it's for my faith base. But
You go, girl. I was like, that just made me so happy.
oh,
Because you're just like, you're so positive. I think that's such a great way to look at it.
You know, every day I tell people to take life a second at a time. That's all I can handle. I've been through so much in my life, and I can't look past this moment. I can't look past today. If it hadn't been for the grace of God, I wouldn't be here. And so, you know, I look at the things that have surfaced and people like Donald Trump, whatever his purpose is. I was listening to NPR yesterday. And so the interesting thing is, with all the historical moments that have occurred in this election, one person hit the nail on the head in saying that the best thing Trump has done was to kind of invigorate some things in people. And so I kind of feel like they say when you're sick, especially from the South, like if you have a illness or something, to draw the fever out, do something to bring the fever to the surface. And I feel like he's doing that. And in all of his craziness and madness that some perceive him to engage in, he's causing a lot of us to unite in ways that we probably wouldn't.
And people to show themselves.
Yeah, we get to really see who people are, and I think that's great.
Yeah. I would even like in my seeing, Trump being elected. I still remember when he was elected, and all of a sudden, these protesters come, and for me, the issue of race itself, or just ethnicity versus ethnicity, or just male versus female, like I didn't really know these issues, and like when he was elected, it was a time in which I was getting politically involved. And so to see everyone coming out, it was like, it was like a bomb for me. Yeah. I was like, I'm like, there's so much I don't know and need to know because of this.
And it's like, it's been going on all along. But then too, when I look at people, even though I might not agree with a lot of his politics, the people that support him, I want to know what their root cause is.
Yeah.
Even when he has come out and openly lied about things, like, there's always a root to something.
What are some things, I'm sorry to cut you off, what are some things in your publication that, I guess, the same topic in mainstream media, could you give an example of how you would portray a story or narrate a story differently about the same subject today? With any example?
Yeah, so the way that I've been taught about the Black press and Black media is that we report news from a Black perspective. And so in me wanting to transition out of a newspaper into a magazine format, I really enjoy features. I like to ask people questions, and I just believe everyone has a story.
Right.
And so San Diego, the Black population here is roughly 5%.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not big.
That is tiny.
But it's very tiny.
Yeah.
And there's so many amazing people in this city, and specifically for me, people of color, because I feel like as a Black woman, I want to see other people that look like me.
Yeah.
I want to know their stories. How'd you get here? Why are you here? And that's been the fun part. And so basically I format stories the way most other stories are formatted, but I might focus in on specific things that relate to their experience as a Black person.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. More of kind of like, who are you? You're saying of, everyone does have a story, which is why we're here, getting your story.
Yeah, exactly.
I wrote at the Vista for quite some time here on campus, and I just felt like there was a focus on, and I don't mean to insult anyone.
No tea, no shade.
Or have any shade. It just seems like students at this school believe that there's some formula that they have to go by, and if they don't go by that formula, they're doing something wrong. And in spite of not wanting to do something wrong, they end up missing out on very important, interesting stories.
Well, I think that's life.
Yeah.
I think people do that.
Exactly. So we started College Cast just to get these stories that might not be newsworthy, but they're still interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm still glad that we're here today to get this story.
Absolutely.
So I'm already learning.
And this to do it at an institution like this, I was talking to Professor Pace recently over at the comm department, and just expressing to him how diverse this campus is now. Because I couldn't go to a historically Black college. My dad was like, "Nope, you're not." And I really wanted to. He wouldn't let me.
Interesting. Why?
Well, not that it was bad, but I think he believed I couldn't handle the HBCU experience growing up here.
Okay.
So coming from a place where there's a small Black population, I probably just would have went buck wild, honestly. Like, I would have been way too excited. Like, there's Black people everywhere, oh my God. So, I mean, I'm kind of glad that I didn't, but I remember specifically being here early on, and there was an incident of a noose hanging with one of my friends on campus in her dorm. And I remember vividly being in this class, and I was the only Black student, and I remember the teacher would tell us to break out in groups, and nobody would come sit with me. Nobody would do the group thing with me.
What year was this?
This is in the early 2000s. I can't remember specifically what year. But I remember we had a candlelight vigil, in protest against the noose hanging. And there was a girl that was in my class that wouldn't even talk to me, but yet and still she was out crying and shedding tears and bawling. Like, this is so sad. I can't believe this happened.
Yeah.
And I remember I got up and I said, you know what? the reason why I felt like I needed to stay at USD is so I could learn how to deal with people like you guys.
That's what we were talking about briefly before.
Good for you.
Yeah, but it sucks because what I was saying was USD was my training ground to learn how to deal with racism.
Yeah, that's insane.
So that I had to take on that mindset, and it's like, you can't stand here and cry at a vigil, but you don't even talk to me in class.
I think that's something that not all people are either born with or can even learn in their life. And maybe not everyone is meant to take that role. And I learned recently that perhaps I have a responsibility that isn't shared by most other people. And I would hold people to unfair expectations because I just assumed everyone felt the same way that I did and that they were choosing to ignore it. But I've realized some people just don't see that for themselves in their lives, which is understandable. So now I've taken this role of, I'm here, I have this ability, I have my voice, I have my, reasons and emotions, these things, but also my experiences, of my oldest brother being gay, of also being an addict, of, some of my family members not speaking to each other, of my mom, being on welfare when we lived in California, but then living with my dad in New York, of being very financially secure. So I've moved around a lot. I have all these different experiences, so I'm able to connect with people and see those things that some people don't see. So bringing back up in my class, I'm going to bring up that there was a black woman who was saying that she felt uncomfortable or couldn't bridge the gap between herself as a black woman, but also as any person who was racist, whether it was against Hispanics or Asians, Latinos, or black people, for herself. So I challenged her. I said, if you want to change something, that you have to do something about it. But if you choose to not do something, knowing that there's an issue, then there's no room to complain if you choose not to do something. So it's tough bridging the gap of getting people who are aware of a situation, but then also motivating them internally for themselves to want to do something and feel like it's their responsibility, getting people to latch on to that responsibility, which I saw an issue, and that's why we're here today, is because this is my way and Alexa's way of saying, we see something, we're going to do something. And if we don't, who are we to say anything at all?
And I think it's a process. It starts in a conversation. So if someone's not ready to confront an issue, like I just had an experience the other day. I'm taking a class with the amazing Dr. Pearson, and he turned on a small portion of Roots in class. And it'd been a while since I've seen it.
For the people who've never heard of it, could you give like a 10-second?
Yeah, I'm literally sitting here like, wow, what?
So Roots is a story about a man, loosely based on the life of a man named Alex Haley, who took the time to trace his roots back to Africa.
Whoa.
So he traced his lineage like all the way back to before slavery, from when his family got abducted and put on, in the slave trade and brought to the States. So he was able to trace his family like 4 or 5 generations. So this movie came out in the late 70s, and then there was a remake of it in the last 4 years. So I've seen Roots before, and I explained to him after class how difficult it was to sit there and watch it again, just a small portion. When they aired Roots, they aired it over like 8 days. It's long, it's huge. And I told him I don't watch things like this in mixed company. And what that meant was I usually will do this at home or with other people like me because I was extremely livid when I left the classroom. Well, it wouldn't have been fair if I'm seeing a scene where a slave master is beating a black man or a black woman's being raped or, something's going on, that I turn and there's a white student next to me. There's triggers going off. There's triggers.
Would have, even if they're like texting on their phone or not taking it seriously.
It's like, well, not even that. I don't know. I've learned as a communicator and a person in the communication studies to not assume things based on people's actions. People interpret things differently. But I had to literally just walk out the class when it was over. I had to just go straight home.
What made you feel that way?
Well,
if you could put it in words.
It kind of set me back to when I first came to USD and this whole like plantation mentality that I felt was here, or that
I get that sense in San Diego in general sometimes.
It's definitely like that in San Diego. Absolutely. So
No way.
yeah. So
Hello,
right,
hi,
she's
I'm
like,
Alexa.
wait.
I know. I'm like, and I came here and I was like, oh my god, like there's so much diversity. I'm like, look how many people are like in my class are different. Like my friend.
Now there
like,
is diversity there. That is an important point.
Yeah.
Like it's funny you said that though.
Yeah, like for me, like growing up, I'm from Fairfield County, Connecticut. I've said that before, but like literally, like that diversity was like this girl gets tan, like she gets a tan, and it was like, oh, like she must be like, now she's not Irish, oh she's Italian. Oh, there's the diversity.
Yeah.
You know.
So there's your token person
Yeah.
that like
Wow.
someone can.
But to even hear her experience, like just because I'm a minority on campus, I can't negate your experience of diversity. And I don't use the word minority in terms of people.
In that sense.
I remember when you said that. That was so interesting.
Yeah, I was taught that we are ethnically identifiable because minority means less than, and so that's what it's translated into over the years. And so I say ethnically identifiable, but even before, and I had to really, this was a part of my process coming back to USD. I remember being here before where I was the only person of color in class. And now I'm looking at my classes and I might be the only black person, but the class is actually diverse. And so I had to open my eyes and see that. Like they are doing a better job at trying to diversify the campus. And diversity doesn't necessarily mean more black people.
I have a question that it's kind of been in the back of my mind. So I mentioned this on another episode, but I grew up in a town called Riverhead on Long Island in New York, and I was the minority there. There was, I think, something like, I don't know, 30% Latino, something 35% African American. Then there's a percentage of Asian,
You know,
et
other
cetera.
side of it.
Exactly. So, and then there was like, the Irish kids. So coming to LA, I lived in Santa Monica for a bit. It was kind of the same thing, but then how people viewed white people in LA, they're like, oh no, like they must think this, they must behave this way, or this is how they must view us. So when I came to San Diego, of how I was formed into the person that I am, in my comm class last semester, my research class, I noticed the only black students in my class, they were basketball players, but they'd always sit in the back of the classroom. They wouldn't participate, and I always noticed they had some sort of persona that they felt enabled to have a voice or say something that I got the sense that they feel like they wouldn't have been listened to. Do you have any perspective on that?
You mean like, had they not been athletes? Or
I mean, no, nothing about being
Okay.
athletes. I just knew
That's
just
coincidental.
because they always had their jerseys and stuff. Has nothing to do with the story.
Yeah.
But
But just being the.
they never participated, and I know that they were smart students. I hear that, I eavesdrop, and I see the things that they're talking about. And I always wondered how come they never participated or felt comfortable to participate. But going back to my class was, 95% of white students. Did you ever feel, since you've come back to USD recently, that you feel sometimes uncomfortable to voice your opinion?
I'm almost 40 years old, so I'm in a way different.
Way different,
space.
yeah.
I'm 37.
Yeah.
I've lived some things, and
So I guess
it's a little different. I think years ago, maybe 19, 20, I would have put more emphasis on being uncomfortable instead of feeling like I pay money to go here too.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mindset. I think it depends on previous experiences. And for me, I just kind of am like, what? I'm here. I'm not going to let you take away from my experience.
Yeah.
I'm paying a lot of money
If
for
I want
this
to say
degree.
something, I'm going to say something.
Yeah, and I'm gonna
you're
going
gonna
to
hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I had to go through a mental adjustment. I do think that's something that needs to be addressed because just because someone's a certain ethnicity doesn't mean they all have the same upbringing. I mean, I grew up in a household where my parents had a wide range of experiences. I mean, my dad worked on Capitol Hill. He worked for the first black woman to run for president, Shirley Chisholm. My dad met Malcolm X.
Wow.
He was at the March on Washington. I just come from a different background.
Yeah.
We had different conversations in my house.
It's just in your bones to be
Yeah,
heard.
so I just didn't. Things were different for me. Not everyone has had that experience.
Yeah.
And so if you're struggling with identity or acceptance, not that it makes being the only one any better. But it's just those conversations, and so for some people it's a process, because I do remember being that student sometimes.
Wow. Right.
You know.
I guess to switch very quickly, if we could talk about some publications that you've been proud of publishing.
Didn't you meet the president? Didn't you meet someone?
My mother went to the White House with a delegation of Black publishers. So the Black Press Association is headquartered in Washington, D.C. And so one of our conventions, Obama did like a video to the Black publishers, thanking us for our work and things like that. And DC is really small, like it's not a big place. So a lot of times if we have conferences, and I still participate lightly with the Black Press Association, even though not with the newspaper, then we'll get to meet people of that caliber. But my mother met President Bush, dad, senior.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
Or you
Former President Senior.
Yes.
Former President Senior. And you pulled it up in class, and I dropped everything I was doing. I was like,
oh.
I was like, you're kidding. I was like, what has this woman not done?
No, she did that, but it was cool to say that my mom met the president. And even talking to my dad, he said a lot of people he knew they're on stamps right now. Thurgood Marshall, he sat with him in law school. So it's crazy. The things that I was accustomed to hearing and seeing are now like just historical moments.
Yeah,
that's insane.
There's actually, Alexa, if you want to, while I look it up, there's something that caught my eye. I forget her name. Angela Rye, I think her name is. She's like a
My
political
fact checking?
pundit. No.
You're like, Alexa, yes.
There's just a person that she brought up during the midterms of honoring her. I forget her name. I think it was Fannie Lou Hamer. Does that ring a bell? Is there anything that you would want to shed light on and just kind of enlighten people about her and just kind of what she stood for and who she was to the community?
Oh, gosh.
And also people like her, like you're saying, Thurgood Marshall and all these great people who shaped culture and moved it forward. What does that mean to you, and how does that affect your publications and your voice?
There's so many in Fannie Lou Hamer. I would just encourage people to Google her. She just has such an extensive history.
When I read about her, I just want to go and hug her somehow.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. My shero, if you will, is Ida B. Wells, who was one of the first Black female journalists in the Black press started in 1827. So around the early 1900s, late 1800s, she was writing and talking about lynchings and just really bold.
Tough stuff.
Yeah. So I reached a point when I came back into the family business that I had to separate myself from the experience and actually look at the history. Like I really took for granted what I was engaged in every day, because it was just like breathing. I mean, that was like my first job. After school, I learned how to type there. We were still using typewriters. I learned how to answer phones, help customers. Like that's just what I did. So I didn't really recognize the experience and how important it was. And so sometimes I tried not to focus on those things too, because at the end of the day, they were just people that, and not saying not focus on it, but put too much weight on it, because I feel like we all have the ability to do great things. They were just people that actually stepped out, sometimes through circumstance.
Yeah.
Like Rosa Parks. I mean, I don't think she got up that day and said, I'm going to start a bus boycott. That wasn't...
The thing that she did was very small, but what it meant was very large.
Right. The ripple effect. And so it's an honor. But one thing I'm learning to do, even though I'm in Black media, I don't ever want people to think that I'm so pro-Black that I'm anti other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I love that God created all of us. We all have something amazing to offer. Like
I'm gonna cry. I was like, you're the most accepting human being.
Well, you know what? If I say that I believe in God, if I'm a Christian, like, who am I to because then I'm doing reverse racism. I'm like, I'm better than you. And that bothers me.
Yeah.
In a space and time where I think African Americans are speaking up more, and our voices are being heard more. We're still dealing with a lot, but I don't ever want to get so up here that someone else feels inferior to me.
Right.
That's important.
I kind of off topic, but not really. So when I came to USD, like one of the first things I heard about it was that they had an all-black graduation. And so my mind, I would like, I didn't understand that. I was like, well, why? I'm like, well, don't you want to like include everyone? Like, isn't the point like have blacks and whites and whoever there? And my friend's like, Alexa, like, I don't like. She's like, I know you don't get it, but like the whole point is to have people walk across the stage and having the people in the audience look at that, saying, I can do that too. Is that correct?
Yeah, and also, I mean, our numbers weren't always that big here, so the black demographic has grown significantly. And then you have black students that have come here and never finished, So, I mean, I could have easily been one of those, but I was determined to finish here just because of everything that was thrown at me.
I was just interested as to why you came back here after you felt so alone, in a sense, I guess.
No one would take all my credits.
Well, I asked straight. Just down to the science. There you go. I was gonna be
too many here.
It's like profound, like
no,
whatever.
Number one, I kind of hit a point of no return.
Yeah,
so
wow.
I had invested a lot, and
Also, what you mentioned before, sorry, of kind of taking that responsibility. You see something and you want to change something. And you say there's also a need for you here on this campus.
Yeah,
I appreciate that you're
love
here.
the school. USD is a great institution. I would love to come back here one day and teach. That's how much I like what they have.
I would take your
here.
class. Oh my god, there better be a wait list.
I love the school. It's the people that represent the school.
Yeah.
And so am I any better if I come and say, I can't do this, I'm leaving? Or do I jump in and change mindsets one person at a time?
Yeah.
And see, okay, what is it that makes you like this? Why are you like this?
And that's all you can do sometimes.
What's wrong? Why?
Sometimes people don't even think anything is wrong. So it's important to have those conversations where you first stop and say, like what's the need? And not be offended.
Yeah.
I think in cultural conversations, you can't be easily offended. Because I could sit here and be like, what do you mean you don't understand the need for a black graduation?
Yeah.
No, you're expressing it didn't resonate with you.
Yeah, not in a bad way. It's just like,
being
it's an
bad or
opportunity
good.
to learn.
Yeah. And I have to think, okay, if I was you, I'd probably think the same thing.
Yeah. It was just, I'm definitely gonna definitely sit here and be like, yeah, I was very sheltered and I don't know anything. Like, I just admit that to people. Like, I'm like, look, like, I don't know why, at first, when I said the Black Lives Matter, I wasn't like, I'm not gonna be opposed to it. I think it's beautiful. But I also think I'm just like, what? I was like, I don't understand it, and what
are the sides?
Yeah.
And what does it mean?
Yeah, and stuff like that, I just never really got it.
And there should be teachable moments, and so that's another reason why I'm in media the way I am, because now I know I have the ability to create stories and maybe present something in a different way. I welcome those types of conversations where somebody's like, I don't understand, I don't get it, because if we shut that down in you, like, how are we helping to navigate the conversation?
Yeah, I totally agree.
The bravery is in saying, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand why, especially if you've grown up one particular way.
Oh my gosh, when on the East Coast too, also, like, everyone hears, it's like, I refer to it as the woke culture, if you will. Like, I would, like, say things, and it was never with, like, malintent. It'd just be, like, something stupid, and they would be like, whoa, Alexa. I was like, what? Because in the East Coast, like, I'd be around people who would just, it was so blunt, and just, like, they're like, look, it is what it is. Like, if you're offended, it's your problem. And here, everyone's like, I'm offended, like, and I want you to know why. And I was like, oh. Like, last year was a learning experience.
Also, there's another side to that, and, in my class being told, I'm not going to say by who, but that I'm an aggressive person. But I talked to my friend afterwards and said, you know what, Kevin, you can have this tone with people. He's like, because I have known you for so long, I understand what you're trying to say. I get it, I know, but sometimes I can be off-putting because I'm very passionate about, if I believe in something, I will defend it, I will argue for it, but also I'm very curious in hearing about what people have to say on the other side so that I could understand them as much as wanting them to understand me. I just, like we were talking about before, of some people just aren't willing to do that or don't even have the desire to do that. So it ends up me being very passionate. They're not interested, however, so they see it as me being aggressive.
I think a couple of things. Two, the ability to jump in a conversation per se and say, I want to change something. Because I wasn't always this person. I grew up in it. My dad ran for politics a few times. He was a school board member in DC, elected school board member. My mom worked in politics. That's not something I really care to do.
Right.
It's grimy. I like people, but not that much, and I'm good.
Yeah.
So, but there's a progression. So, at one point where someone may not show interest, I think in all conversations you have to look at the history of the person. So, where you might come off as being aggressive, well, in a particular conversation, we're only seeing you at this juncture. We
Right.
don't have your story before.
That's true.
I had an incident with my roommates where one of my roommates, I didn't realize this, but she had been the victim of domestic violence. Well, I also was a victim of domestic violence. So I understand the psychology behind being a victim and what some triggers can do
Right.
for you, especially interacting with men.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had a situation with our male roommate, and he doesn't know this, and it's not for me to tell him, but something happened in text message. Well, they both don't have this background on one another, and I know the background of both of them. So the conversation came off as wrong. It didn't happen the right way because they lacked information
Right.
about the other person.
Right.
Interesting.
And so there was no real resolve. I mean, it wasn't like
How do you resolve that though?
You have to
Talk in person.
talk in person, take your emotions out, and actually want to understand.
Right.
Because I think with understanding that can solve a lot of things. So, number one, texting. Just some conversations shouldn't happen via text.
FaceTime,
And if they
dude.
start right, and if they start
Yeah.
say, "Hey, we'll talk about this."
Well, I
later."
mean, that's specifically just
Yeah.
at a juncture like you're saying of, I think what I learned answering my own question of arguing not for the sake of being right, arguing for the sake of learning. And then maybe you don't have to be right. You
And if
don't have
someone
to,
approaches you and makes an accusation or says, "I believe you're this way or that," then it's saying, okay, well, what's giving you that impression? Because that person may be drawing from their previous experiences. Maybe you are a trigger to them of someone that has similar characteristics.
instead of saying, no, I'm not because.
Right, right. So we all tend to draw from our past and sometimes attach that to people. So if I've had negative encounters with white people, then when I see white people, I'm like, oh my God, they're all crazy. Well, no, that I can't do that. It's not fair because it's just not right.
You can't pin it. Yeah, I get it.
You
It's like
can't.
trust issues with like a boyfriend. Like I can't date again. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you can. Everyone's, maybe guys are jerks in different ways, or girls are jerks in different ways. But like, not everyone's the same.
And being honest and saying, you know what, I'm just not ready to talk about this right now. Or even being able to self-assess. I think we don't do that. And a lot of things are started out of assumption unnecessarily. Because we don't know how to hit the pause button in cultural conversations or just conversations in general. We don't know how to step back and say, you know what, I'm going to disengage right now. Let's revisit this.
Yeah.
I'm a little too emotional.
Right.
Let's come back.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How does this weave itself into the black press and also in how things are written? I'm curious to hear about what stories have been published that are typical of, from an African American's point of view, what that looks like, and how it could be different from, say, I don't know, a movie that came out, like, all I can think of is Wakanda, Black Panther. Like, how would a story from the black press sound compared to TMZ reporting about Black Panther?
I don't know, but everybody loved Panthers.
Yeah.
So you probably can't even say that. I literally was in tears for like 30 minutes after that movie. I couldn't stop crying. But specifically, I can think of a story. So there is a gentleman named Freeway Rick Ross, not the rapper. Not the rapper. He got his name from a drug lord at the time named Freeway Rick Ross. And so if anybody's ever seen the documentary by Ava DuVernay, 13, I think it's the 13th or 13th, about the 13th Amendment.
Okay. I believe so.
It's fascinating because it talks about the what our country went through in terms of the war on drugs and how it inadvertently or
disproportionately.
I think it was intentional. How it negatively targeted the black community, and so it broke up families. It destroyed homes. Even now, so marijuana is legal. Yeah. But blacks were incarcerated at higher rates for selling marijuana.
Yeah.
So
as
now,
opposed to white offenders.
Others, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you haven't seen it, it's a very interesting, documentary in the wording that was used in media from our presidents in terms of the war on drugs and how certain images of black people were put on TV as like, oh, these are the bad people. But this particular man, Freeway Rick Ross, how he basically the CIA was influential in getting drugs into the Black community. Yeah.
I
So
think-
the story was published,
Yeah.
but this isn't something that would have been published mainstream.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. It almost, like, I could see ahead in all this is how unfair it is. Because I'm thinking if stories like this were to be exposed in mainstream media, the first thing people say is fake news. But
Specifically
these,
Donald Trump, but I think,
yeah.
but then
Even before Donald Trump, though, that people would say, there's no way in my United States of America this could happen. I cannot accept it.
well, they're probably right because they're saying my United States, so
Exactly.
their United States isn't my United
Yeah.
States.
But that's the thing, like you're saying, from a Black perspective, it's like, no, these are our stories. This happened to us, and we're trying to tell you about it. All you have to do is listen.
Whoa. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. The term fake news, like people joke around, oh, fake news, but like it's just to discredit reporters who have gone like over the border or like who have like just gone to different countries where it's like third world and there's war, and then for that to say like it's fake news. Like I understand maybe Donald Trump was not. I can see where he wasn't trying to like directly do that to every reporter because I'm sure he is aware, or I hope
Talking
he's
about
aware.
Jim Acosta, or are we talking about here?
Oh,
Or
you're
just
right.
in
'Cause
general?
I
In
didn't-
general.
Okay.
Yeah, because he just got his White House privileges.
His
revoked.
credentials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microphone snatched. out of
Okay.
him.
Yeah.
I mean, just I guess when it
Generally.
generally
Right.
when it first occurred. Like I can see where he wasn't trying to take away the credibility of those reporters, but the fact that it's just gone so out of proportion is just it's so horrible. Especially I can totally see where it comes into play with people who are not of privilege or who are not of the quote majority. I can totally see. Has that affected you a lot with the whole fake news, black press? I mean, it's not really fake, it's just stories.
I really pick and choose my battles. Some
Yeah.
things I'm just like whatever, because at the end of the day, birds are still gonna fly, fish are gonna swim, whether Donald Trump says so or not. It doesn't change what the facts are.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it's Wayne and he swims with the birds and
I was-
flies with the fishes.
I was
you know?
like,
So, he's
So
in
it's
his
just you
own
pick
world.
your battles. Like I
Yeah.
just refuse to engage. I mean, and unfortunately in this administration, I don't get a break. Like every day something's happening, so I'm just like, well, this is too much in 24 hours. I can't right now. It's too much. But there are definitely people have different perspectives, and I think when I was giving the presentation in class, I was saying everyone in the classroom is sitting in a different place. The room looks different to everyone from their vantage point. It's
Yeah.
the same thing with all of us.
If you could say something to, I guess, students at USD that were born in San Diego, raised in San Diego, and now still live in San Diego, what kind of advice would you have for them in kind of becoming themselves rather than becoming a person they think they should become?
oh,
Well, it depends on what students I'm talking to.
I guess just
the general.
Well,
the
you can't really generalize that
the
because I was raised here,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
so it depends what student.
So that's what I mean in getting to these stereotypes of the typical person. I guess, could you attack the stereotype of the typical San Diegan and what you would hope and how that stereotype would evolve and kind of what you see for these people that are different? There is diversity. You see this in different areas in San Diego. And maybe not what they can be, who they already are, and what has inspired you in coming across these people and seeing that these stereotypes are not so true.
That's a loaded question.
I understand.
I'm trying to
Well,
process
I
it.
mean,
Hello.
I'm just,
Do you see what I'm asking though?
I'm thinking of how I grew up because even though I am an African American female, I grew up in predominantly white communities. I grew up riding horses. I grew up in a well-to-do family. We had a big house that wasn't typical. So my experience is different. If you were talking to an African American student that might have come from the southeastern community, their experience is different. But just because they live there doesn't mean they're not experiencing the whole city. Just because I grew up in a particular part of town doesn't mean I didn't experience.
Right.
And I don't believe where you live necessarily is always a reflection of who you are. It's just where you live. This is an expensive place to live.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Extremely expensive. But the thing that has bothered me about San Diego and I I guess the mindset that everyone is enjoying it here. There's certain parts of this city where certain people don't feel welcome.
Mm-hmm.
We could say communities like La Jolla, Rancho Santa Fe,
Yeah.
Del Mar, the beach areas. I've heard of stories where some people of color just haven't gone into those areas, and it's like, well, why not? Well, I don't feel welcome.
Yeah.
Well, your tax-paying dollars are part of it, you know. So
Yeah.
this whole mindset that I can't go there
Mm-hmm.
or I can't be here. And sometimes those things are self-imposed, and sometimes they're just from experiences.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have an experience as a black woman of being pulled over by the police, but I have black men in my life that have been pulled over excessively.
Right.
That's interesting.
So it's different. That's why I'm like, you have to be really specific on
I had an interesting conversation with there's this guy that I met just randomly. So I've been playing Pokemon Go because my middle brother
Are
does.
people still playing that?
People are still playing
Kevin
it.
does.
It's huge. So
Kevin does.
the thing is, I started playing it because my brother played a lot when he was living here for some time, and he's a funny guy. Whatever he's doing at the time, I have to do that in order to like have him hear me. So I'm like, all right, I'll do this with you.
Yeah.
Before that, I was doing jujitsu. He was
Yeah.
training all the time, so I did jujitsu so I could hang out with him and talk to him.
Oh,
So I was just playing a few weeks ago, and there was this community at Balboa, and we were just like playing and meeting each other. And I ran into this guy in Hillcrest, and we ended up talking about just the gay community and how the gay community in Hillcrest is different than in West Hollywood. And we had this like incredible conversation.
that's really cool.
But then we started talking about, like you mentioned, La Jolla, and the differences and the type of people who are attracted to certain locations because of why. And I told him I saw a lot of the older gay men that I saw in Hillcrest seemed like the type that would have grown up in La Jolla, pleased their family, that were very conservative, but when they were comfortable enough and could provide for themselves, they moved to Hillcrest and they're living in their truth for what that means to them. So I guess to add to what you were saying, it really matters who you're talking about,
It
what
does.
community and their
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
But
And what your approach is going to be in going into these different communities. Like when I was coming up, like my mother and father would take me times to go look at these like $1 million model homes just for fun.
yeah,
Like I would do that for fun. We would go to open house.
yeah,
Oh, my dad and I do that.
I love it, but
So
one thing
fun.
she wanted me to understand was don't feel like you don't belong here.
hmm
So she started conditioning me.
Yeah.
So that when I am in those communities, I don't feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's
You
incredible.
know, but the fact that I have to do that, that's
that's
the
insane.
problem.
Okay,
Think
I get
about
you.
it from a different perspective. Look at Alessia Cortez, who just won a seat in the House. She's a very young woman
Oh, New York.
in New York.
She's
Oh,
29,
that's
the youngest.
so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the thing
Wild.
is, she's not any more or less intelligent than some other people in her class. But the difference is she had the tenacity to believe that she could, and that really is the game
Right.
changer.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
I-
there, it's something. Sometimes it's innate, but it just really depends on what was put in you
Right.
and who said you could
It's true.
Or
you know,
couldn't.
or could.
And
yeah.
what did you do when you got told that you couldn't?
Mm-hmm.
My it's actually interesting. I was just about to bring this up. So, my dad, I grew up again, East Coast, whatever, outside New York City, and again, the diversity was essentially non-existent. And my dad wanted me it was not in like a, in a narrow-minded, racist kind of way, but he's like, I want you to go to a Catholic school, like Catholic values, sure, but the people that attend the Catholic schools just so happen to be people like you, and it wasn't like, it was not like a status thing. That wasn't it. It was like if he knew because I know myself too, when I'm not ready, I was not ready. Like, it's good for me to learn about diversity in this place. Like, if I were to be thrown in anywhere, and all of a sudden my world just kept warped, he's like, I feel like he would be afraid of what would happen. And it was never out of like trying to like, he's not a snob. It was just like, he's like, he knew it'd be like a crash and burn kind of situation. And I was even nervous. I think one of my first experiences with the San Diego community, or an outside community, because I'm bound to campus. I don't have a car. Uber's like my best friend. But, I love trying new libraries. So I went to the San Diego Central Library. Oh, there was, I understand it's a public place, but there was policemen in the library. And there were homeless people just posted up. I mean, like, good if they weren't harming anyone, but it was just like, the diversity, like, I just thought San Diego was just, like, from, like, Alcala Park to La Jolla, like, and, like, I went to Del Mar, like, a few times, and, like, in Mission Beach, and I was like, oh, like, that's San Diego, and then I went there, and I was like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
So I felt when I was in Hong Kong for a bit, and I was like, this is so new. I thought I knew it all. This is something else.
Yeah, it's scary. I was like, I went back, and I was talking to my friends for an hour. I'm like, guys, like, have you gone to the library? They're like, no. What? I'm
And
like,
that's the newer one, so the old one was across the street from the
and now
post
I
office.
felt so, I mean, out of place, not in a bad way, but I'm just like, I feel like, you know, I'm like walking
Like you
around.
have to catch up.
Like like it's like I was walking around with my cute little like bag, and like I'm like so cute.
That part wasn't on the brochure, the tourist brochure.
Like everyone was like they're just so themselves, which is great. But I was like oh my god, I'm like there's a whole new world, and this is just a library.
And we have a large homeless population here.
Oh yeah,
You know,
It's another conversation.
It's a whole anher conversation.
That's the only reason I was laughing. Not that this topic is funny at all, because it's not. But I was laughing because I'm just picturing even LA and how just of a different beast LA is.
Right.
And
right.
imagining people like Alexa coming from
Skid
there.
Row.
When I went down
to LA, yeah.
Like, why is the street different?
Exactly.
Oh, that was one of my first experiences. I met this girl via Facebook over like a prior USD Class 21, and she let me visit her in LA because I've never been to LA. Mm-hmm. That was like my graduation present. Shout out Catherine Dahl, you're amazing. But so I started like panicking in Venice Beach. Like, I felt like I was having a panic attack, and, like, I kept my cool, like, maybe you shouldn't know this, but I was, like, kind of freaking out, and, I'm getting my henna tattoo, because, you go get your henna, it's all cash and whatever, and this guy, like, shoots himself up at something right next to me.
Oh, wow.
Starts vomiting. I'm seeing all these, like, walks of life near me, like, I've never been exposed to that in my life, and it was just a truck hitting me.
Wow.
And, little me goes up, and I'm like, I kept my cool in the car, I was like, Kat, is that LA? Like... And I know it's not all of LA, but like that, it is a whole new beast.
On the other hand, quickly, my experience with homeless in LA is I tried. They were twins, and they're both homeless, and I tried giving these guys money, and they wouldn't accept it. They're like, no, like I don't want your money. I just enjoy talking to you. It's such a pleasure. So even diversity in diverse populations.
And not all homeless people are poor.
Yeah, or addicts.
Yeah, I've talked to a few homeless people. I remember there was a gentleman near my dad's office, and he was kind of panhandling, and he was like, he looked like he was drunk. And I was like, dude, let's have a conversation. Like, what are you doing out here?
Okay. What's your goal?
No, really. I was just like, what are you doing here? And he told me where his little makeshift house was under the bridge, and he had a key to his sister's house. He got places to go, but he didn't like her husband. Yeah. They always got into it. And I've heard, I met another gentleman who worked as a law clerk. Yeah. And he was like, I'd rather be here.
Some really fascinating people.
Some people just can't deal with it. Not everyone's, some of them have P.O. boxes that get checks every month. They just don't want to deal with responsibility.
That's why I forget where it was. It may have been something weird like Wisconsin or something. Now that Wisconsin's weird. But somewhere not typical, where there is this rising population of homeless youth. But they were telling reporters they didn't want to be called homeless. They're just houseless. That they just identify more of going back to, when you think about it, that 200 years ago, 300 years ago, people lived differently. Yeah. And if you wanted to use your hands and build things and build your own little, shed and live in it, by all means, that's great. Right. Catch your own food, do these things. So I think when people try to hold on to these values, we're like, oh, they're crazy, they're this, they must be that. It's like, no, they're just different, and that's okay. But anyways, for the sake of your time, is there anything that you would like to add, or anything that we miss that you'd like people to know or hear?
I think the biggest thing in the fact that we even have to have diversity of the media. So not only is there Black press, there is Filipino press, there's Latino press. Like there's Chinese press. San Diego has a lot of community ethnic newspapers, a lot of them. One of my dear friends, and she's like a big sister to me in the publishing industry, Fannie Miller, she is the owner of El Latino newspaper. She started the paper when she was 18. I think it's good for people to understand that there is more than what meets the eye, and just because you have what you're accustomed to doesn't mean that that's everything. And to diversify, you don't have to be a Black person to read a newspaper published from a Black perspective.
Right.
You don't have to be Latino. I mean, my Spanish is a little shaky, but when I see Fanny's newspaper, I pick it up.
Yeah.
She
Un
just had
poquito.
un poquito.
Hola.
And I can read. Actually, and my sons were in a dual immersion Spanish program before they relocated, and so I encouraged it. I've studied French a little bit, but Fanny just had a Spanish speaking only women's conference that I went to, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I translated here and there. I could get what was being said, but the experience
energy.
was beautiful.
Oh.
The information was beautiful. It was so needed, and so we can get out of boxes. And I think a lot of the boxes that we are placed in are just because just people don't know.
Yeah.
They just don't know. And so just like I'm sure the presentation in class, and the section in the book was like 2 pages on the Black press. I think maybe even a page. But the fact that, Dr. Brinson allowed me to share that information, I was honored because hopefully it let people know there's also more to the story.
And now we're talking about it even more, and hopefully more people will be, informed. So since you informed us and educated us, we were talking earlier about, I guess my last thought. You're telling us about Roots earlier. I'm aware of Roots, but I know a lot of people on this campus are 18 and probably
Hi, I'm 19 actually.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever listened to Lupe Fiasco before.
Yes, I have.
So
My
his
dude.
new album Drogas Wave. Did you hear it
No,
at all? So
no.
I think a good comparison, what he's trying to do is bringing that culture and those stories and modernizing it. So the theme of his album was like this world if, like, he's reconstructing the slave trade itself and saying, Africans weren't sent to the Americas. Actually, and he takes people on this like epic tale of, the Africans kind of revolted. They take over the ships, and then they're one with the ocean, and they like control this larger picture now. You know what I mean? Like this kind of beautiful tale that he's trying to respin this thing. But also, it's, I think, his way of saying something terrible did happen to our community, but we're going to create a story for ourselves to appreciate something that could have happened that we wish would have happened. So making everyone aware that Lupe Fiasco is an amazing artist, and he has a lot of good messages he wants to get up there.
And I definitely think people should. Roots is, it's not an easy watch. Interesting little fact too. Some people might not believe it, but the slave passage is also the same route that the hurricanes follow.
That's what the album was about,
Yeah.
and he takes on all
That's
these
crazy.
different things. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of bars,
I
but
bet.
if you
Bars.
if you look at it, you're like, wow, let me Google that, let me Wikipedia that,
Yeah.
let me research
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
Dick
anyways,
Gregory was a really good resource for that too. Before he passed, comedian and activist, and
Who?
so Dick Gregory.
oh, okay,
Yeah, so he
interesting.
really prevalent, like
Yeah.
60s, 70s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm
Good to
glad you
know.
brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being with
Thank
us.
Thank you
for
so
sharing.
much.
Honored.
Oh my God, this is an incredible. Oh my God, you make me so happy.
I'm like, I just wake up every day. I'm glad you found some.
I just wake
My
up
little
every
boy,
day.
I feel like my
You're
life
so
is
cute.
so boring. I'm just like, I don't do
That's funny.
anything.
I don't do anything. It's no big deal. I just I made a newspaper, but no big deal.
Well, everyone, comment your thoughts. Share if you found it interesting. If you didn't find it interesting, tell us why.
Yeah.
If there's anything that we missed, let us know. And keep in touch with us. Let us know your thoughts. Thank you for listening.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
And we'll have Chida's
Magazine
social
magazine
media
links, social media, all that
Yeah.
stuff. Good
linked and
stuff.
whatnot.
Thank
All
you.
right. Signing off, everyone.